The deafening crack of a gunshot split the morning air as Daisy Miller flinched, her trembling fingers hovering over the contract that would sign away everything she had ever known. The year was 1878, and Silver Creek, Colorado, was no place for a woman alone with 3 young siblings to feed and a mountain of debt left behind by her father's passing. "Go on now, Miss Miller." "Ain't got all day," drawled Bartholomew Jenkins, the wealthy cattle baron whose beady eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a vulture circling wounded prey. He had wanted the Miller homestead for years, and now, with their father 6 feet under and the banknotes coming due, his moment had arrived. Daisy's hand shook as she dipped the pen into the inkwell. 22 years old, and about to become indentured to this man for the next 7 years just to keep a roof over her siblings' heads. It wasn't slavery, not legally, but the contract might as well have shackled her in iron. "Wait." The deep voice cut through the stifling air of Jenkins' office like a cool breeze. Daisy turned to see a tall figure silhouetted in the doorway, trail dust still clinging to his denim and leather. The stranger stepped forward, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor. He was lean and weather-beaten, with eyes the color of a summer storm and a determined set to his jaw. "Young lady, don't sign that paper," he said, striding into the room with the confidence of a man who'd faced down worse than an angry businessman. Jenkins rose from his seat, face reddening. "This ain't your business, cowboy. I suggest you ride on." The stranger ignored him, instead fixing his gaze on Daisy. "Name's Yates Blackwood. Rode in this morning looking for work. Overheard some talk in the saloon about a young woman about to sell herself into service to save her family's land." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of coins. "How much does she owe?" Daisy's breath caught in her throat. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but this debt is mine to bear. My father borrowed against our ranch, and now $487, Jenkins interrupted, sneering. "Plus interest, more money than a saddled tramp like you has ever seen." Yates Blackwood didn't flinch. He simply stepped forward, took the contract from the table, and with deliberate slowness tore it in half. Jenkins lunged to his feet. "Why you no good here?" Yates said, emptying the pouch onto the desk. Gold and silver coins clattered across the polished wood. $500. "Every last cent I've saved over 10 years of driving cattle. It should cover her debt." Daisy stared in shock. "Mr. Blackwood, I can't possibly accept." "You can and you will," Yates said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've seen what contracts like these do to people. No one deserves that fate, especially not someone trying to protect their family." Jenkins looked from the torn contract to the pile of money, greed eventually overcoming his anger. He snatched up the coins, counting them quickly. "Fine, the debt's settled," he glared at Daisy. "But don't think this means you'll keep that land forever, girl. Winter's coming, and you won't last without your father." After Jenkins grudgingly wrote out a receipt confirming the debt was paid, Daisy and Yates stepped out into the harsh sunlight of the main street. She turned to face her mysterious benefactor, questions tumbling through her mind. "Why would you do that for a stranger, Mr. Blackwood? That was your life savings." Yates adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Money's just money, Miss Miller. It comes and it goes. But freedom, that's something you can't put a price on." He glanced toward the dusty road leading out of town. "Besides, I reckon I was looking for something worth spending it on. But now you have nothing," Daisy said, unable to comprehend the magnitude of his sacrifice. Yates shrugged. "I've got my horse, my saddle, and 2 good hands that know how to work. That's more than some." Daisy stood straighter, determination rising within her. "Then I insist you come to our ranch. We can't pay much, but we need help and you need work. It's the least I can offer in return." For the first time, a smile cracked Yates' weathered face. "I'd be obliged, Miss Miller. Lead the way." The Miller Ranch sat nestled in a valley 10 miles outside of Silver Creek, a modest spread with rolling pastures bordered by pine-covered hills. As they approached on horseback, Daisy pointed out the features of her home with unmistakable pride. "It's not much compared to Jenkins' operation, but my father built it with his own hands." We run about 60 head of cattle, have some chickens, a vegetable garden, and that stream provides the sweetest water in the territory. Yates took in the small but well-maintained cabin, the sturdy barn, and the fenced pastures. It's a fine piece of land, Miss Miller. Your father chose well. Daisy, please, she corrected him. After what you did today, I think we can dispense with formalities. As they dismounted in front of the cabin, the door burst open and 3 children tumbled out. The oldest, a boy of about 12, regarded Yates suspiciously while 2 younger girls, perhaps 8 and 6, peered curiously from behind their brother. Daniel, Molly, Sarah, this is Mr. Blackwood, Daisy introduced. He's going to be helping us with the ranch for a while. Daniel stepped forward, his chin lifted in a way that reminded Yates of Daisy. Did you sign that paper for Mr. Jenkins, Daisy? Her smile was genuine as she shook her head. No, Daniel, Mr. Blackwood helped us settle the debt. We still have our home. The tension visibly drained from the boy's shoulders, though his suspicious gaze remained fixed on Yates. What kind of cowboy helps strangers, Daniel? Daisy admonished. Yates knelt to meet the boy at eye level. The kind who's seen what happens when good folks get pushed off their land by men like Jenkins. Your sister was brave today, willing to sacrifice her freedom for yours. That's worth respecting. The little girls emerged from behind their brother, curiosity overtaking caution. Do you shoot bad guys? The younger one, Sarah, asked with wide eyes. Yates chuckled. I try not to shoot anybody if I can help it, but I can rope a calf, mend a fence, and cook a decent pot of beans. Molly studied him intently. Our pa died last winter, the influenza took him. The simple statement, delivered with childlike directness, carried the weight of their struggle. Yates nodded solemnly. I'm sorry to hear that. Losing a parent is hard. You can sleep in the barn, Daniel declared, apparently having made some internal decision. There's a good spot in the loft. Daniel, Daisy exclaimed again, but Yates waved her concern away. The barn will suit me fine. I've slept under worse. He looked around at the ranch, already noting repairs needed on the corral and a loose board on the cabin's porch. If it's all right with you, I'd like to get started right away. Daylight's burning. That evening, after a simple but hearty supper of cornbread and stew, Daisy joined Yates on the porch. The children were inside preparing for bed, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. You didn't have to fix that corral today, Daisy said, handing him a cup of coffee. You must be exhausted from your journey. Yates accepted the cup gratefully. Work keeps the mind clear. Besides, those cattle of yours would have found that weak spot by morning. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the chorus of night insects and the occasional lowing of cattle. Mr. Blackwood Yates, Daisy began hesitantly, I still don't understand why you helped us. $500 is a fortune. He stared into his coffee cup as if the answer might be found there. 6 years ago, I was working a cattle drive in Texas. There was a family along the way, mother, 3 children. Their father had died in the war. They had a small place, just a cabin and a few acres. Local rancher wanted their water rights. He took a slow sip. By the time we drove through again the next season, they were gone. Mother had signed a similar contract to yours, ended up working in the rancher's house while her children were sent to relatives, never saw each other again. Daisy's hand went unconsciously to her throat. That's terrible. It is, made me promise myself I'd never stand by if I saw it happening again. He looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the first emerging stars. When I heard about you in that saloon, I couldn't just ride on. Well, we're grateful, all of us. She hesitated, then added, but I won't take charity. You'll work for your keep, and somehow, someday, I'll repay that money. Yates smiled. I have no doubt you would, but consider it an investment, not charity, in good people and good land. The following days settled into a rhythm of hard work. Yates rose before dawn each morning, tending to the horses and cattle before the rest of the household stirred. Daisy would find him already at work when she emerged to prepare breakfast, his quiet competence bringing a sense of security she hadn't felt since her father's passing. The children warmed to him quickly. Little Sarah followed him like a shadow, peppering him with endless questions about his travels. Molly observed his work with serious attention, learning to help with the chickens and garden. Even Daniel gradually softened, especially after Yates spent an afternoon teaching him to rope calves. One evening, about 2 weeks after Yates' arrival, Daisy found him in the barn crafting a small wooden horse. "Is that for Sarah?" she asked, leaning against the stall door. Yates nodded, his hands never pausing in their skilled movements. "Her birthday's coming up, isn't it?" "She mentioned it 3 times yesterday," Daisy laughed. "She's not exactly subtle. That's beautiful work. I didn't know you were a woodcarver." "My father taught me, said a man should know how to create, not just destroy." He blew some wood shavings away, examining his work. "He was a furniture maker before he took to ranching." "Where is your family now?" Daisy ventured, realizing how little she knew about the man who had saved their home. A shadow crossed his face. "Gone. Fever took my mother and sisters when I was 14. Father lasted another 5 years before his heart gave out. I've been on my own since." "I'm sorry," Daisy said softly. "Seems we both know something about loss." Yates looked up at her, and something in his gaze made her heart skip, and something about carrying on afterward. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Daisy found herself noticing the way the lantern light caught in his dark hair, the strength in his hands as they worked the wood, the quiet dignity in his posture. She cleared her throat. "Well, I should check on the children." "Good night, Yates." "Good night, Daisy," he replied, his voice carrying her name like something precious. As autumn deepened, the ranch transformed under Yates' care. Fences were mended, the barn roof patched, and the cattle grew fat on the summer's last grass. Daisy watched in amazement as their precarious situations slowly stabilized. With Yates' knowledge of cattle and her skill at managing their small resources, they might actually survive the winter. But trouble arrived on a crisp October afternoon in the form of 3 riders. Daisy was hanging laundry when she spotted them approaching, with Bartholomew Jenkins riding at the lead. Her heart sank. Yates emerged from the barn, casually positioning himself between the approaching men and Daisy. His stance was relaxed, but she noticed his right hand rested near his holstered revolver. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he called as they drew near. "What brings you out this way?" Jenkins reined in his horse, looking down with contempt. "Still here, Blackwood. Thought you'd have moved on by now." "Found work that suits me," Yates replied evenly. Jenkins' gaze shifted to Daisy. "Miss Miller, I've come with a proposition. Winter's coming, and word is your herd's not large enough to see you through. I'm willing to buy this place at a fair price." "We're managing just fine, mister." "Jenkins," Daisy replied, stepping forward to stand beside Yates. "The ranch isn't for sale." Jenkins' expression hardened. "Don't be foolish, girl. One bad winter and you'll lose everything anyway. Take the money while it's offered." "The lady said the ranch isn't for sale," Yates repeated, his voice still calm but carrying an edge of steel. "I suggest you respect her decision." One of Jenkins' men, a burly fellow with a scarred face, spat on the ground. "Boss, we could just run them off. Ain't like anyone would question it." Jenkins raised a hand to silence him, though his eyes never left Daisy. "I'm trying to be reasonable here. $500 for the whole spread, more than it's worth, truth be told." Daisy lifted her chin. "It's worth more than money to us, Mr. Jenkins. This is our home." "Your home," Jenkins sneered, "is sitting on the only reliable water source for miles. My cattle need that water." "Your cattle have the creek on your northern pasture," Yates pointed out. "More than enough for your herd." Jenkins' face flushed with anger. "Been studying my operation, have you?" "Well, let me tell you something, Cowboy. I've built the largest ranch in this county by knowing what I need and taking it. This land will be mine one way or another." "Is that a threat?" Yates asked quietly. "Take it however you want." Jenkins turned his horse. "Think on my offer, Miss Miller." "Won't be open indefinitely." As they rode away, Daisy released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He won't stop, will he?" Yates watched the retreating riders with narrowed eyes. "Men like Jenkins rarely do, but we'll be ready." That night, after the children were asleep, Daisy and Yates sat at the kitchen table making plans. The lamp between them cast warm light on the map of their property that Yates had sketched. "We should move the cattle to the western pasture," he suggested. "It's more defensible if Jenkins tries to rustle them." Daisy nodded, then hesitated. Yates, I need to ask you something. When he looked up, she continued, Are you staying because you feel obligated, because of the money? His expression softened. Is that what you think? I don't know what to think. You gave up everything for strangers. Now you're risking more trouble by standing against Jenkins. It doesn't make sense unless you feel responsible for us. Yates was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the outline of the ranch on the map. I gave that money freely with no expectations. As for staying, he met her eyes. I'm here because for the first time in years I feel like I belong somewhere. Daisy's heart fluttered at the intensity in his gaze. The children adore you, she said softly, and their sister. He asked, his voice low, color rose in her cheeks. Their sister is, grateful and confused, and afraid of misunderstanding what can't possibly be there. Yates reached across the table, his calloused fingers gently covering hers. What if it is there, Daisy? What if I'm staying because the thought of riding away from you feels like leaving part of myself behind? Her breath caught. Yates. The moment was broken by a distant gunshot, followed by the panicked lowing of cattle. They both leaped to their feet. Stay with the children, Yates ordered, grabbing his rifle from beside the door. Lock the door behind me. Outside, the night was alive with chaos. Several of their cattle were stampeding across the pasture, and flames licked the sky where the far fence line should have been. Yates cursed under his breath. Jenkins hadn't wasted any time. Daniel appeared at his side, clutching his father's old shotgun. I heard shots. Get back inside, Yates commanded. This is my home too, the boy insisted. I can help. Yates recognized the determination in his eyes, the same look Daisy got when her mind was made up. Stay close and do exactly as I say. They worked through the night to control the fire and round up the scattered cattle. By dawn, they had accounted for most of the herd, though 3 cows were missing and presumed stolen. The fence line was a charred ruin, and exhaustion weighed heavily on them all. Daisy brought coffee to where Yates and Daniel sat on a fallen log, surveying the damage. This is just the beginning, isn't it? She asked quietly. Yates nodded grimly. Jenkins is sending a message. He'll escalate until he gets what he wants. Then we need help, Daisy decided. We can't fight him alone. The sheriff, Daniel suggested. Yates shook his head. Sheriff Walton's in Jenkins' pocket, but there are other ranchers who have had trouble with him. We might find allies there. Over the next week, Yates rode to neighboring ranches, building a coalition of small landowners who had also suffered at Jenkins' hands. Meanwhile, Daisy organized a watch rotation, ensuring the ranch was never left unguarded. The children adapted to the tension with remarkable resilience. Daniel proudly took his turn standing watch. Molly appointed herself guardian of the chickens and garden, while little Sarah served as messenger, running between watch posts with remarkable speed for her short legs. One evening, as Yates returned from visiting the neighboring Carson ranch, he found Daisy alone on the porch, a rifle across her lap and her face taut with worry. Any luck? She asked as he dismounted. Jim Carson and the Patterson brothers have agreed to help. They've had their own run-ins with Jenkins. He settled beside her on the porch step. How are things here? Quiet, too quiet. She glanced toward the darkening horizon. It feels like waiting for a storm to break. Yates studied her profile in the fading light. Despite the exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath her eyes, she was beautiful. Not the fragile beauty of painted ladies in saloons, but the genuine beauty that came from strength and determination. Daisy, he said softly, if this gets worse, you might need to consider taking the children and going to your aunt in Denver just until— No, she interrupted firmly. I won't be driven from my home. My father died for this land. I won't abandon it. Your father would want you safe, Yates argued gently. Daisy turned to face him, her eyes flashing. My father taught me that some things are worth fighting for, this land, my family's future. She hesitated, then added more softly, the chance for happiness. The air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken emotions. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Yates reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek. Daisy Miller, he whispered, you are the bravest woman I've ever known. She leaned into his touch, her eyes never leaving his. And you, Yates Blackwood, are the most honorable man." When their lips met, it felt inevitable, like the final note of a song that had been building since the moment he'd torn that contract. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened with the release of weeks of unspoken longing. Daisy pulled back first, her cheeks flushed and eyes bright. "I never expected this," she admitted. "When Pa died, I thought my life would just be struggle and sacrifice from then on." Yates smiled, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Life has a way of surprising us. I was just passing through Silver Creek. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." The tender moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses, many horses. They both stood, Daisy raising her rifle as Yates drew his revolver, but it wasn't Jenkins and his men. It was Jim Carson, the Patterson brothers, and at least a dozen other small ranchers from the surrounding area. They reined in their horses in the yard, and Carson dismounted with a grim expression. "Jenkins is gathering his men," he announced without preamble. "Word is they're planning to drive you out tonight, burn the place if necessary." Daisy's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "How many?" 15, maybe 20, Carson replied, "but so are we." He gestured to the assembled ranchers. "We're tired of Jenkins thinking he owns this valley." Yates looked at the determined faces of their neighbors. "Thank you all for coming. Let's get prepared." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. The children were secured in the root cellar beneath the kitchen floor, with Daniel reluctantly agreeing to stay with his sisters. The men positioned themselves around the property, using the natural cover of rocks and trees. Daisy refused to hide, instead taking up position in the barn loft with a clear view of the approaching road. Night fell, and with it came a tense silence. Stars appeared one by one, indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath them. Yates joined Daisy in the loft, their shoulders touching as they peered into the darkness. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "know that meeting you has been the best thing in my life." She turned to him, her face barely visible in the dim light. "When this is over, I want you to stay." "Not as a hired hand, as," she faltered. "As what, Daisy?" he prompted gently. "As whatever you want to be, partner, husband, father to those children who already love you." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I know it's forward of me and perhaps too soon, but life out here is uncertain and he silenced her with a kiss, pouring every ounce of his feelings into it. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Yes, to all of it, if you'll have me." A warning whistle from one of the Patterson brothers cut through the night. Riders approaching, they broke apart, returning to their watchful positions. Soon, the sound of hoofbeats became audible, along with the jingle of spurs and the low murmur of men's voices. Jenkins led the procession, his face twisted with malice as he surveyed the apparently quiet ranch. "Miller," he bellowed, "come out and face me." Yates nodded to Daisy, and together they emerged from the barn, stepping into the yard. The moonlight illuminated them clearly as they stood side by side, unarmed. Jenkins sneered at the sight. "So the little lady still has her protector. Touching, but it won't save your ranch." "This doesn't need to get ugly, Jenkins," Yates called. "Turn around and ride away." Jenkins laughed, a harsh sound in the night air. "Or what? The two of you against all my men. I don't see those odds favoring you." At his signal, his men spread out, some dismounting and drawing weapons. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Actually," Daisy said clearly, "the odds aren't quite what they seem." As if on cue, Carson and the other ranchers emerged from their hiding places, rifles raised and expressions grim. They had Jenkins' men surrounded, Jenkins' face contorted with rage. "What is this?" "This," Yates said, stepping forward, "is what happens when people stand together against a bully. These men have watched you push them around for years. They're done with it." Sheriff Walton, who had been lingering behind Jenkins' men, nudged his horse forward. For once, he looked uncomfortable. "Now see here, Jenkins, you said this was just about collecting a debt. You didn't say nothing about facing half the county." "There is no debt," Daisy announced, "and no legal claim to our land, just a man who's used to taking what he wants." The sheriff looked from Jenkins to the armed ranchers surrounding them. Self-preservation clearly won out over loyalty. "I can't sanction any violence here," "Jenkins, I think you'd best reconsider." For a moment, it seemed Jenkins might order his men to fight anyway. His face flushed dark with fury and his hand hovered near his gun. But faced with the united front of ranchers and the sheriff's wavering support, even he could see the battle was lost. "This isn't over," he spat. "You've made an enemy today, all of you." "No," Carson spoke up. "We've just stopped tolerating one. Now get off this land before we decide to express our feelings more directly." With a final venomous glare, Jenkins wheeled his horse around. His men followed, some looking relieved to avoid bloodshed. The thunder of hooves gradually faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence that felt like the aftermath of a storm. One by one, the ranchers came forward to congratulate Daisy and Yates. There were handshakes, backslaps, and promises of continued support. The sense of community, of belonging, was overwhelming after months of struggling alone. When the last neighbor had ridden away, Yates and Daisy retrieved the children from the root cellar. They spilled out into the yard, wide-eyed with excitement despite the late hour. "Did you shoot the bad men?" Sarah asked, bouncing on her toes. Yates scooped her up. "No shooting necessary. Sometimes standing together is stronger than any gun." Daniel looked up at him with newfound respect. "You got all those ranchers to help us." "Your sister did," Yates corrected. They saw her courage and decided to find their own. Daisy smiled, gathering Molly close. "I think we all found something these past weeks, strength we didn't know we had, friends we didn't know we needed." Her eyes met Yates over the children's heads. "And sometimes, family where we least expected it." Later, with the children finally asleep and the ranch peaceful under the blanket of stars, Daisy and Yates stood on the porch, his arm around her shoulders and her head resting against him. "Jenkins won't give up entirely," Yates cautioned. "But he'll think twice now that he knows you're not alone." "I'm not worried," Daisy said. "We'll face whatever comes together." Yates turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Daisy Miller, when I rode into Silver Creek, I had nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back. Now I feel like the richest man in Colorado," she laughed softly, "because of a struggling ranch and 3 wild children, because of a woman brave enough to fight for her family and wise enough to know when to accept help." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I love you, Daisy. I think I have since I saw you in that office, ready to sacrifice everything for those children." Tears glistened in her eyes as she smiled up at him. "And I love you, Yates Blackwood, the man who tore up my contract and offered his last dollars to a stranger." "Best investment I ever made," he murmured, drawing her close. As their lips met beneath the vast Colorado sky, Daisy knew that while challenges would certainly come, harsh winters, dry summers, the ongoing feud with Jenkins, they would face them together. The cowboy who had saved her with his last dollars had given her something far more valuable than money. A partner, a protector, and a love that would endure whatever the frontier might throw at them. 1 year later, the Miller Ranch, now the Blackwood Ranch, thrived under their joint care. The herd had doubled, the house had expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the land that had nearly been lost now supported not just Daisy's siblings, but also the baby boy sleeping in the cradle Yates had carved with his own hands. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Daisy would remember that moment in Jenkins' office when all had seemed lost. How a stranger's act of kindness had not only saved her family's home, but had brought her the greatest love she could have imagined. It was, she thought as Yates joined her on the porch, exactly the kind of story the West was built on, not just tales of gunfights and gold strikes, but of ordinary people finding extraordinary courage and sometimes extraordinary love.